We'll call the meeting of the Finance Committee of the Keystone Central School Board to order. And I guess, do we want to do this presentation as part of number one? Before we do that, though, do we have any visitors that would like to speak to the Finance Committee? Anybody online or? All right, if not, we'll move on to item number one, which is also a presentation by Joni, and I think it's similar to the presentations we've seen about the budget updates up till this point. She's shared it with us at least 3 or 4 times, I think, since the beginning of the calendar year. So I will turn it over to her and she can walk us through this.
Okay.
This is her latest update.
This is the budget update as of today. All these slides look familiar. The timeline has not changed. Next Thursday, you will be tasked to adopt the proposed final budget, and on June 13th, also adopt the final budget. This is kind of a new slide, but I did want to show you what the governor's budget proposal is for 24-25. The basic idea around this screen is that it is remaining static. So the state subsidy for basic ed is the 23.9, special ed is the 4,004. That's this year's budget numbers and proposed for next year. We are getting a bit of additional money for next year. So basic ed is increased 449,000 and special ed 118,000 for a very, very small increase of 567,000. So that is numbers that are in the budget. They're solid. There's proposed to possibly get additional money, but we were at a meeting on Wednesday and it's not even 50-50. I don't even know what it is. We can't count on the money. So I didn't not even remotely put it in the budget. So then the next slide will show you some notable expenses. Again, these shouldn't be anything that's new. However, I did see my public school facility improvement grant. That number, and I apologize, we switched it 3 times this morning. That number dropped to 1 point, I believe it's 1.4. They ended up with that grant, and I'll show you later. They ended up with that.
Which numbers?
Yeah, what page are you on? I'm so sorry, Joni.
Page 4.
Yeah, page 4.
Yep, that one.
Okay,
Yeah,
the public school facility improvement grant. That's
Okay.
The HVAC,
And that's
$8 million.
Yeah.
Yes, this is a 25% match.
Okay,
We recently decided to kind of split that grant apart a little bit and have 2 options for that. One for next year, the one for like the 25-26. And so that number, and you'll see it on the additional slide, is more like 1.4 for 24-25. Which is nice but that's not in the budget. That's not an expense. That's just off the that's off the fund balance. So I just make sure I made that clear. Liberty Curtain obligation, that's the additional dollars for the bond, the 23 bond that we took out last December. As you know, the health insurance increase was 18%, which was 1.7 over last year. So that's how much it increased in 1 year. Cyber charter, I usually typically budget extra money, usually around 300,000, because that fluctuates, and one child could be $30,000. You have 10 of them, that's $300,000. So I typically budget for that. And here I put the cost of a regular ed student, a special ed student for the charter school, and what it cost for for a cyber student. So I kind of just wanted you to see those numbers. So when you know that we spend $7 million to send kids to the charter school, that's what these numbers come from per student.
So I'm so sorry, Joni. Do you want us, I did miss the beginning. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Do you want us to hold off on our questions at the end? Or do you want us?
The charter school related?
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Oh, okay. So the 300,000 is the amount. So you're thinking that per child, the range for next year's budget is between 300,000 and $1 million.
No, I would have said, whereas I did put additional monies back because I do budget $7 million for charter school. And that's
Right.
just based on $30,000 average of 388 kids.
So we
390
spend about
kids. Yes.
7,000, we spend $7 million a year,
Mhm.
pretty much consecutively.
Yes.
Okay,
These-
okay.
This money, this notable expense was in the budgets. In the past, I have budgeted extra because that fluctuates so much. And it doesn't, 300,000 sounds like a lot of money, but that's 10 kids. And we could get it, they do it monthly. So one month we may have more kids than other months. Because they come in and out of the
Okay, so,
charter
okay, so
school.
you took the 7 million and you're adding the 300 to a
Yes,
million
Yes.
to the, okay,
Yes,
okay,
yes.
now, thank you. All right, that's where I
a typical
misunderstood.
reserve. And I just wanted to show you that's typically what I do
And the 7
in
million,
past budgets.
7 million is all charter school,
Yes.
brick and mortar,
I
cyber.
thought that
No,
was just Sugar
that's
Valley.
just Sugar Valley.
That's-
Sorry,
Yeah.
7 million is just the charter.
Okay,
school,
all right,
Just the
that's,
charter
Cyber
school.
charter
Yeah,
is in addition to
cyber
that.
is an additional money.
that's what I thought.
Yes.
How come the charter school and the cyber school costs, how can they be so close together when one's brick and mortar providing the
That's
heat,
lawsuit.
electricity, all that,
Great
and then
question.
the other one is not?
Fair
Great
How
funding.
can that be so close?
That's why-
Excellent
That's why we
question.
need you guys to go out there and help fight this reform. Exactly right. We have the same question, but it's mandated. They tell us.
That's
how
that
much.
lawsuit.
It's
in
based on our
Pennsylvania
budget.
For fair funding. and
Yeah.
State
Yes.
says this
Yeah.
is what you're gonna pay.
Yeah,
We pay it.
we don't come up with that
We've been arguing this
forever.
A long
process for a
time.
long time, that it's not fair and equitable. I mean, it's not that we're against the charter school, because they're taking our kids over and educating. The way that's funded is what
Mhm.
needs
Yes.
reviewed. And say, like the cyber is a business.
Right.
And their biggest thing that the cyber school is out to do is make money for their shareholders.
That was the question I have. Every parent guardian is allowed to pick any cyber school that's out there in the galaxy, correct?
Correct.
Mhm.
We want them to come to, at least if you're gonna go to charter school, come to
Right.
Keystone
Do
Do
Central.
they have to be, or is there a certain level that they have to meet certain accreditations, or can it just be Jim's school?
I think they have to pass some level of
Of-
accountability with the
yeah.
state in order to call themselves
Okay,
a charter school.
Okay.
Cyber
So
charter
cyber,
school,
yeah.
but that's
And
the
then
s-
who
the state's-
oversees that?
It's the state.
The state,
Pretty
right?
loosey goosey.
okay, well, thank you.
Are these regulations that define how much they get paid, are they state or federal?
State.
Part of
Purely
this-
state, okay.
Part of the
Thank you.
cyber, or the charter school law that was passed back
90s.
in 97, and it has not changed one bit. And the biggest problem with that is they are reimbursed. The charter schools, the ones that the big problem is the cyber charter school, because they get a greater reimbursement for students than the public schools do.
Yeah.
Significantly. And if they would reduce that, there's a push right now, or at least some kind of a legislative push for it on the part of certain legislators to make a level funding for all. If they did that, and I think it's $8,000 per student.
It
Yes.
is.
If they did that, and I know Joni's probably going to get to this in a minute, but if they would do that, it would save us $1.2 million in the budget, which coincidentally would probably take care of the shortfall we have.
Yeah.
In the entire budget.
Huh.
And
That's
that's
yeah,
the part
the
that's so
impact.
aggravating, and
Yeah.
we should be
Oh, I agree.
on these people in Harrisburg, because there is some momentum for that right now, to make some.
Today's
changes.
election day. Who are you voting for?
Does Keystone Central, like, say you get so much money from the state, and you have kids that go to the charter school or cyber? Do you keep a portion of that money to cover transportation costs and all that?
I think we do that for,
Transportation is actually taken out of the charter school calculation because we provide them transportation.
That's what I'm wondering.
Yes,
And
that
what's
is
the
actually
percentage of
one
that,
of the
do you know?
few expenditures we're allowed to take out.
Tony, can you explain to Chris how this number came up? That, I know we just talked about, there's a ratio that you take, you add everything up and
You pretty much take your budget, you take your whole budget. So $88 million, and you take that budget, you're allowed to take out a few things. Transportation is
Right.
one, any kind of capital reserve, any kind of budgetary reserve. And that's honestly about
Sorry.
it. And you
And you
take
can't
out,
take anything like that out of cyber, can you?
no, cyber just charges a number. But the crazy thing about the charter school is we actually have to pay them on the $7 million. We're paying them twice. We're paying them $7 million and we're paying them on the $7 million. That's just not right.
Can you give an
That should be taken
example?
out.
Like, what do you mean? I'm so sorry, Jenny. Would you help me to visualize what you're saying when you take
So-
7 million and then 7 million?
Okay, so the $88 million budget, let's say we're gonna take 5 out for transportation. We're allowed to take all of our transportation out. We should be allowed to take out the $7 million that we already pay them off of that budget to
Oh.
reduce that. And then that number, the 27,000 would probably be something like 20,000.
So if we just went ahead and did it,
We're not allowed.
well, what if we just went ahead and did it?
We would get in trouble.
In compliance with.
I'm
We would.
kidding.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. I'm
And they
kidding.
watch.
I'm joking, world. I'm
Yeah.
joking.
see, that's another fight that we've been trying to have. If our budget's 88 and we take 5 off, it brings it down to 83. So we're paying them on that calculation of 83 million.
Right.
Mhm.
If we remove that 7 million that we've already, because we're paying them, take that off and pay them off of the, what, 76 million. That's the difference. Yeah. So why can't we remove that money? We're still paying them for so much for every student, but not paying them because our budget already includes that money we have in there for. 'em.
And that's basically the
so
lawsuit.
you're,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a fight
So
we've been
that,
having.
So you're-
it's unfair calculation. There should be other things that we should be able to take out as well that we shouldn't have to pay for.
Wouldn't you have loved to have been in the room when they figured all this stuff out?
It's been.
And
it was
that
so many
table
years
that
ago.
day? Oh, man.
Right, right.
Tricky.
And I, like I said, I don't think in years past, I don't think anyone's objected to paying it. It's just unfairly calculated.
I got,
You know,
understood.
And so
Well put.
you
Yep.
understand out of the 88,
Mhm.
7 of it's going to the charter school. Another 4 or 5 is going to cyber schools. We don't have any choice to pay. that. So right there, there's $12 million that we don't have a choice to pay. So, that's, I understand that, I just want you to understand kind
I
of,
just, it kind
sometimes
of,
we're,
it kind of really was wild that the cyber school was almost just as expensive.
so that's
And
what
they
we're
don't
up
have
against.
near the output
Right,
that everybody else
Right.
does. That's,
right. So that's why that reform is so
They
important.
are indeed. And
Yeah.
This is why we're asking board members to advocate with our representatives and the rest of the legislature to rethink how the cyber charter funding model works.
Or vote. Vote for the people that
Well,
want.
it's both
you
ends.
said,
Yeah.
you said it right at the beginning of this conversation. It's a private business.
But we need our local, people, board people, to go out and vote and support public school reform. We need them to go to Harrisburg and support those types of, the $8,000 is huge if they would change that for cyber school. That is a huge-
Unfortunately, unless the citizens know about it and they get very angry, not at the charter school, but at the fair, we gotta be.
Mhm.
Unless the population, the citizens, I'm sorry, but I don't feel like my voice has ever been effective because they're like, oh, yeah, you're a school board member. But it's the citizens that if they got together and
Well, I think there's strength in numbers.
I
think
hope
every
so.
vote counts. I mean,
And,
Yeah.
I really
and
do.
now that you have this information as well, as you're talking to your constituents and they're
Yes.
asking questions about funding, you can say,
We can answer it.
now you can say, here's a really specific thing
and
that we could use some assistance on.
And maybe
Yeah.
someday we'll have a form letter we can hand them. Here, mail this if you want.
Well, and I
Sign it
think
and
that-
mail this.
I think we've done that. We've done that. I know we've had letters and stuff from
We
the
have.
IUs has given us resolutions that we've
Mhm.
passed and sent
Oh, I
down,
mean, for,
asking for reform.
well, I don't want to beat
So
this.
I know every time we have a
Sorry.
legislative meeting, It's the first thing that we brought up is the
Yeah.
charter cyber reform.
Let's be realistic. If they're making that much money, there are some significant contributions going,
Mm,
whether we're
Oh,
ever
yeah.
gonna learn about them or not.
That's what
And
PACs are for.
Unfortunately, that's what current
They have
politics
lobbyists,
is.
big
Nice.
time.
That's why I'm a real believer in severe term limits.
So the next slide then, I wanted to show you how we were at in April, the shortfall, and for the board meeting, the shortfall was 2.18. We all know that there was a increase in the budget. So I want to make sure we understand this healthcare increase. So it was 1.7 million from last year to this year. That was the total increase. For the budget though, I had budgeted 9% as the increase. Well, that doubled.
Yeah.
So we had to add an additional 900,000. So that 2.18 went up $900,000. So then I went back through, as you had asked, as you had directed at the last board meeting, to go through line by line and scrub the budget. So I want you to understand what I did take out. So the capital reserve of $600,000, that is the money that the general fund gives to Fund 32 for capital projects. I took it out of the budget. That means there will be no money going from the general fund to Fund 32 for any kind of projects. That is just, that was $600,000 that could be taken out because it's optional.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry to, it's my inexperience, but what's 32?
Sorry, the capital fund. Fund 10 is the general fund. I'll stop using numbers because I don't want to confuse you. It's
Oh, it's
just a
easy to
habit.
confuse
It's the capital fund where it's capital projects. So it's Rob's, it's kind of where
Okay.
Rob's money, the 10-year plan,
Mhm.
and we had capital projects on there, and we only have so much money in that capital project. That's Rob's account. The general fund typically every year gives them $600,000 to
Gotcha.
spend.
Okay.
There's no way that account isn't for income. There's no revenue going into that account. It's a total expense account because all the projects are going out. There's no revenue bearing at all in that account. So the general fund funds it.
Okay.
What I'm saying is I took that $600,000 that we typically fund to them out.
So
So
what
Sorry,
will be
Rob.
their budget next year?
minimal.
Well, what does that
And-
mean?
We don't know
Um,
for sure. So
we
some of
talked,
that
yeah, we
is-
really don't. We
yeah.
really
And
don't
that
know.
was my point when at that
Yeah.
last meeting, that I was saying that their budget this year is really fluid at this point. We really don't know what Rob is going to have to work with.
One of the things that we've
A
talked
rough
about is,
idea?
one of the things we've talked about is taking the interest income from our
Right.
investments and rolling that into the capital projects.
We
And then
talked about
keep it-
that at a couple of
Yeah.
finance.
Yeah.
It's about 360,000 that we
Yeah.
made off the bond, which was
Yeah.
super great. And so we talked about recommending that to be rolled over end of May or even June, rolling that over for additional monies. I'm not sure how this year will end. So if there would happen to be any kind of additional funds as well, I don't know. So
Well, I hope that, I mean, I know what it's like for any business. When you get towards the end of the year, you spend it or you lose it. So I'm hopeful and have faith that no one's out there doing that right now.
no,
They can
we
you
have,
can
we
just
have
roll it
halted
over.
spending. We have halted spending. We did that back in April.
Oh, thank
or
you. I didn't know
March.
that.
We did that back in March.
My fault. I did not know that.
Nope,
Good.
no worries. So anything that comes through has to be it either has to deal with graduation or an emergency. Other than that, it's really not getting, if you don't, if you haven't ordered it by now, instructionally wise, you probably don't need it.
Good. Thank you.
You're welcome. So insurance, like I said, that you'll probably see that next month, the actual quotes will be in. And we're hoping to see a savings of about $45,000 with general liability. Cyber charter, this is the money I talked about on the previous page where I said I put those reserves back while I cut them out. Because again, that was another, and I hope we stay flat, but they were my additional reserve funds that I had used to help if that number would fluctuate. Substitute expenses, that's your teacher subs, your secretary subs, that's just all substitutes. I've seen a little bit of a decrease from last year to this year so far. So I'm hoping we see some savings there.
So we're
However,
only
this is about
saving
the time. What's-
90,000 for the entire fiscal year for substitutes?
Decrease. Oh, we spend,
We spent a lot
A
more
lot
than
for
that.
Oh, no,
for
no, no, but I'm
substitutes.
saying out of everything, we're only thinking that we're only gonna have, out of that whole pool that we pay for substitutes,
Yes, I
the,
only
the
think.
third party.
Yeah,
We're only say maybe 90,000
yes.
because,
It
and
really
we need,
depends on how many
so if we had fewer classes, we wouldn't need so many substitutes, right?
teachers can take a day if they
Not
have
as
it.
necessarily.
It hasn't nothing to do with how many classes we offer. Teachers have so many days that they can use, and if they take a leave, we have to have.
No, what I'm saying is we had fewer teachers, we wouldn't need as many substitutes.
Yes, but and so part of that is looking at
Maybe.
the changes that we're making in terms of the staffing for next year and recognizing that, yeah, the number of staff is going down because of, you'll see this, the second line, right, the staff attrition resignation.
That's why I was wondering.
But, you know, in terms of trying to figure out how that will translate into
Oh, I missed
substitutes,
that one.
there's no direct path there.
Is that pretty much out of that source for teachers thing?
correct.
With the custodians and the cooks
Teachers,
and
it's all the
everything?
Yeah.
groups, all the groups. And sorry, I did miss staff attrition and resignation, sorry. So that was
Okay.
just through normal resignations. And then we did have a couple accept the early retirement incentive, so that was helpful. And it equated right now to about $700,000, which is great. And then budgetary reserves, budgetary reserves is where I would hold additional monies in case there could be a electricity spike or a technology may have needed extra funding. It was just, again, just an extra amount of reserves that I had put back in case anybody was over there for obviously for good reasons. District-wide software, like I said in one of the slides, we are going and doing an overall view of all the district-wide software. I believe just next year we'll save 50,000. We're going to keep going. We're going to keep going
You
through all
mean
of that.
the
But
software is much easier, more efficient and,
absolutely, more streamlined. Just some of it's
okay,
just
well,
less
I
expensive.
would support investing, as I've always said, I'm always gonna, sooner we get there.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Mhm. So then the total reduction of all of the was 1.9 million.
Good
So
job.
then the shortfall for May is 1.16.
Do we
so-
still have that fund set aside to replace the artificial turf? Do you know?
Not that I believe.
Because Dr. Martin, that she said, back, I don't know, 3 years ago, when that whole artificial turf thing came up, she said she was going to or did, I don't quote me, but there was a certain fund put aside, and I heard her say it a couple times, that there's a fund put aside specifically for the artificial turf replacement.
Do you remember anything about that, Rob?
It would have been taken out of Fund 32, and that's when we were funding the 600,000, a certain percentage of that 600,000 would be going in and earmarked out because the turf was out at 20.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So
15.
we were budgeting and we knew when we hit that number out there, we had some of that 600,000 every year had to put into that.
Or do we still have, what I'm saying is, that turf fund, I understand the practicality of putting money away for the artificial turf, but when that day comes, I feel highly confident that whoever's sitting at the tables, they're gonna get a naming rights and it's gonna be taken care of. So what I'm saying, is there any money for artificial turf sitting somewhere?
No,
Oh, so it never was, it never went through. Okay,
not that I'm aware.
Well, it's part of the 600,000.
It's not earmarked or anything
It's
for
not,
that. No.
it's not earmarked out until 2030,
Right,
and that,
okay.
if you look at that.
Yeah,
picture, the sheet
that's
you
why I
have
was
there, it's way
asking.
out.
yeah. Okay, so no money's being set aside for that. Okay, thank you.
No.
Now, are these projected savings, or is this
Th-
real
they're-
money that you have and that we're not?
So I
spending?
wouldn't necessarily, I don't think call them savings. I would just call them reduction of expenses because then it lessens your shortfall.
All right, instead of saying I'm gonna budget $7,000 for my health insurance copay this year, I need to get a new car, so I'm only gonna budget 3,500, just hope you don't get in a car accident. Basically, right?
Yeah.
Basically, what I'm asking is, does this mean that we're gonna spend $1.9 million less?
It means the budget was the 2.18 plus the 9 plus the 19, 1.9. So the shortfall was much larger. with the 2.18.
$1
So I
million.
reduced the expenses by 1.9. So now your shortfall is 1.16. So that's what your fund balance will be.
So
Let me try it a different way. So I'm just trying to understand.
Okay.
Don't take offense at what I'm gonna say next, because it's not in it. Is
Okay.
this just accounting or is this real?
no, this is real. So we've,
Okay.
so every year at this time, we're projecting how much it's gonna cost to run the school next year.
Yeah.
And so we've decided to not do things, not put money in places
Okay.
to the tune of 1.9
Okay,
million
so you're saying
dollars.
we're aiming to spend $1.9 million less
Less.
next year.
Yes.
All right, that's a good thing.
Correct.
All right,
Correct.
thank you.
Yes,
I'm thick, I'm sorry.
that's
you
okay.
know.
That's all right.
My
So then
expertise
the
was
next
never in
slide.
that. What I had in my pocket was what I was worth.
The next slide will show, as the direction from the board at the last meeting was to go in the direction of the 3.55% millage increase. So that is added into the revenue number. There's also the ESSER funds, and there you'll see the shortfall, the 1.16. To make the budget balance, we have to use fund balance. So that's like your savings account. We have to use the fund balance of 1.16 to make it balance. So there you'll see that that takes the fund balance down for the end of 24-25 to 16.4.
May I?
Mhm.
make a comment? I like that, to be quite honest with you, with the understanding that during the fiscal year, the plan to reduce staff,
Mhm.
if that would be appropriate,
Yes,
would be concurrently occurring. So your expenses by the end of the fiscal year will not be as high as projected.
that would be the goal. And to not have to hit fund balance. That to not have, but I have to go with what I know today.
No, I understand that, but as long as these numbers are conservative, I don't want to see like inflated numbers. As long as these are with the idea that we want to see conservative numbers because that's what this board is we're conservative with money, so, the wants, you would describe it better. So as long as these are conservative numbers, not unrealistic numbers, with the understanding you need a little bit of wiggle room, but these are conservative numbers, correct?
Yes,
Yes.
I'm not comfortable putting unrealistic numbers in.
Well, I
And
mean,
I would be honest about that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be comfortable doing that. So we have to submit a budget that is realistic and makes sense. And whether or not, how much you hit the fund balance, that's the direction that, what will need to be decided.
okay, so as I wrote in my email, the question I was gonna be asking is, with these projected years, what would be the millage increase for all of those projected years as presented?
That's really hard for us to guess
say.
out that long. So there's a few things that come
Okay,
into that, right?
please.
So there, for instance, the state sets what the cap is for every year. And so that's part of it. Also, the funding formula is undergoing some changes. That's part. So our revenues could change drastically. It's based on student numbers, so we have to watch that. So there's a lot of we don't know about. We still have to do some projections, and the projections are based on if nothing changes. If our student numbers don't change, if
Right.
our staff numbers don't change, if our taxation doesn't change. So that's all
It's a
what this,
stagnant snapshot.
that's right. And that's
Yep.
really all we can do because there's no way to know what it's actually going to look like until we get closer
Right,
to it.
but that's what I'm saying, no, looking at the stagnant
Mhm.
screenshot,
Mhm.
what would be the millage increases for the out years to get away from that shortfall?
I don't think we can project that. There's too many unknowns. Anything that we would say now would be misleading at best.
Well, okay, well then we shouldn't say there's gonna be a shortfall because I don't mean to sound argumentative, but we can't say there's gonna be a shortfall then because you don't know.
I know, it is is on here.
Okay, but then if you know that, then that was my question in the emails. You projected to have a shortfall in 2025, 2026 of $5,700,000.
Correct.
Now, what millage rate would we have to raise to close that gap?
We can't.
So that means we're operating in a way that we can't sustain. And that's not an attack.
I think
It's
that's what we're
just-
reading the situation to. Again, there's so many unknowns that are built into this.
Well, then
School
that,
funding and that sort of thing. So I think it would be inappropriate for us to suggest a millage rate that might fix it because there's so many unknowns.
And that's making an assumption that that's what we're gonna use. And I don't want, that would be unrealistic to assume that a 3.55 tax increase for next year would be approved. I wouldn't do that.
no, I understand that, but just so we can, just so the folks sitting here would understand, what would the millage rate have to be as this is presented to close the gap from 2025 to 2026? The
I-
5,700,000.
We can't answer that. I'm sorry. I know that you're looking for a number. We can't answer that question.
Okay, so if 1 mil raises X amount of dollars, and then we just divide that by this number, so that's what I'm saying, that's where I'm going.
And from the administration standpoint, I'm not willing to speculate on what that number might be to close that gap because there are too many unknowns. And I too, am not trying to be argumentative. I hear
Sure.
what you're saying. I think there's so much speculation built into coming up with a number like that. It would be misleading at best.
Okay, all right, well, just roughly, if we take, I'll just do paper napkin math. If it's 3.55% to raise $930,000, you take the 3.55 and you multiply it by 6.5. So 3.55 times 6.55 would be the percent you would have to raise taxes to close that gap. Okay, of course, that's taking it to the voters and all of that. So what I'm saying is, and I understand what you're doing, looking at the projections, but the projections can't be this bad because they're unsustainable. That's bankruptcy. So we need to see something that's not bankruptcy, or are we going into bankruptcy? And if we're going into bankruptcy, maybe we should get someone here from the state to explain to us what bankruptcy looks like for a school district, because those projections, although I respect the numbers and that, you know, that's your profession, but sitting here today,
They've always
that's
looked like this.
bankruptcy.
Projections,
numbers
if we
look
go
like
back
that
10
forever.
years, we've always looked like this because we have.
Well,
to
then
go
let's
with
not
what we
look
know.
like this, because it makes us look like we don't know how to manage money. And this is no reflection on anybody here.
Well, we're not.
What I'm
we're not-
saying is-
We're not remotely bankrupt. We're not in a crisis. That should not be anything that we project out.
But
in
then
the
how,
public.
but like I said, if you're, but that's illogical to me, because if the shortfall for 2025-26 is $5,700,000 under looking at current current numbers and what we know today. And unless something major changes, that based on what we've done in the past, which I'm assuming last year's budget, and if you're taking that and you're putting up to 2025, we have a $5,700,000 shortfall next year. Either we do or we don't. And if we do, the amount that we can increase taxes to make that shortfall goes to the voters, or we file for bankruptcy.
No, not in 25, 26. We still have capital funds. That's why we had the capital funds we've been saving or, sorry.
Well, yes, but then
the
your
funds we've been
reserves,
saving,
right,
Fund balance.
Fund
your
balance
your
is-
reserves will go down to 5 million.
right.
Okay,
Fund
and
balance we
that's
have is for
according to
that
what
reason.
Joni says, that's not sustainable, and we might lose our credit rating. It might affect our credit rating. So what I'm saying is, looking at these numbers, it's either it's that it's
You
if
can't
we're
continually operate in the red.
yeah, I mean, it's just, and you know, the projections, either those are the real projections based on last year's budget and, you know, where we are today, or they're not. And if they are, it's bankruptcy. And if they're not,
I think it's not as simple as that. And so, and there's a lot of reasons for that. One of the reasons is that the small errors compound as you go out. So we know that this year, the budget that was adopted for last year was because that $4 million that we didn't get in level up became a deficit spending budget.
Right.
And so now we're kind of scrambling and trying to figure out what it's going to take to make sure that our budget is in line. And it's going to take some time for us to get there. And I don't know what it's going to look like, other than it has been consistent in education for a very long time that the cost of doing education increases faster than state and federal revenue account for.
Yes.
It's just a fact of life. And it has been put on the local school board to raise local taxes by some chunk of the approved rate from the state. It's just assumed that that is the way that it's going to, that the difference between the cost of doing business and the revenues is going to be made up.
Mhm.
And that's the way the whole system is made. And all, even our funding is dependent on us having our local share, which is where our local taxation amount is in keeping with what the state says it should be in order for us to
40% or
pay our
whatever.
local share.
What are you gonna do when the local share doesn't exist anymore?
I'm not,
Huh.
all I'm saying
I
is this
know.
is the way the state has the system set up, right? All we can do is respond to the way the system is set up for us by the state.
Mhm.
Right, so what, anyways, I appreciate all the time spent on this, and thank you very much. My thing is, I'm voting no for a tax increase right now, because that projection is, as far as I'm concerned, is either at bankruptcy or the following year is bankruptcy. So the way we've been operating, and I realize you're so constrained, I understand that. But this is not, these projections, whether they're close or a little bit too far away, maybe rethink those numbers or look back, because if this is the real projection based on last year's performance, without adding anything extra in, we're talking bare bones budget, enough to keep the school running and the kids safe, it's bankruptcy. So right now I can't support a tax increase, because a tax increase right now is not going to fix the problem a year, 2 years, or 3 years out the road.
It's just a Band-Aid.
Yes, and unfortunately, public education runs on a Band-Aid. So that means creative problem solving, not being institutionalized in our decision-making, whatever that may be. Partnering with someone else, making the district smaller, I don't know, but as far as I'm concerned,
Well, that would be your cyber and your charter school reform. That's where we need your help.
and
That will
also
save millions.
insurance,
Millions of dollars.
insurance, we've got to.
We're all over that,
Some,
but
I
and some
know,
of those things
so-
we can control in the
Yes.
short term, and some of the things we can't. For
Right.
instance, we have a contractual obligation for
Sure.
our current insurance thing, and that's not going to change for at least 2 years.
Right, but that would be in the
Yeah.
projection though, that, because what the package is right now. Well, anyways, you understand what I'm saying.
right, and I wouldn't be able to project what that bargaining agreement.
No,
would look
that's what-
like in 2
exactly.
years.
The only,
I
the
can
only thing
only
I'd like
go-
to add,
Please.
if you have to remember, if you increase the taxes at 3.5% at $930,000,
Sure.
okay? That goes across the board. So the 930,000 for this year equates to about 1.8 million next year, because you added in. So it keeps going across.
Well,
So you
that,
don't-
actually, no, it should be already in the budget.
So if
You don't add, you don't take that surplus or shortfall
If you
of,
don't add the 930,000 to the budget, that number, those numbers up are show that 930 added. So you would take 930,000 additional out of your reserves. So that
Revenue.
1.49 would be what, roughly
2.4.
2.4?
Right.
So that would go up there the following year, because you didn't have that 900,000 this year. That's already built into the taxes for next year. So that would be an additional.
well, that's what I'm saying. The projection that we're looking at for 2025,
so those
2026,
numbers that you're
it already
saying-
includes the
the
tax
numbers you're
increase.
saying about going to bankruptcy would be moved to the left quite a bit if you don't have a tax increase this year.
Well, what I'm saying is, when you look at the projection budgets, those already include the current tax rate plus the 3.55%. So it's not, we're not taking anything away from that. I'm just putting it
That's what
out
I'm just
there.
saying, what you said about you voting against the budget or the tax increase because we're gonna lead to bankruptcy in 25, 20.
I just haven't seen,
That what you're doing is moving that closer, that
if
bankruptcy.
it's gonna happen,
It's happening.
if it's gonna happen,
That's
I'm
gonna
sorry,
happen.
but I've only been on the board 5 years or 4.5 years, and I still have seen the same. And I'm not, this is not blaming, this is part of the institutionalization of public education. Band-Aid, 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 Band-Aid. And so far, I haven't seen any dramatic steps to seriously creative problem solving, don't be so institutionalized in our thinking, whatever that thing may be. Because we've seen these projections now, well, I've seen the projections now, so have you, for 7 years. And it sort of looks the same as like it did 7 years ago.
Looks
And
the
they're-
same as it did 12 years ago.
And
14
they'll
years
always
ago.
look that way because of that Frank just said. There are so many variables that are unknown.
But then how are we able to make budget every year if the projections are so high out in the future? So what I'm just,
Because when we get closer to it, so we can be reasonably sure that over the course of the 6 years that are on here,
Mhm.
our revenue isn't going to remain the same. However, we can't budget for those increases because we have no idea what those increases are going to be.
well, will you base your increase, I'm assuming, please, I'm not, this is not my expertise, so I don't want to pretend or anyone to think, I'm trying to highbrow anybody here, but if the increase has been, let's just say 0.05% every year, then you just roll that same number into the following year. Okay, fine. And I understand what you're saying, because you have inflation though, that you're always being drugged by, you're always behind the ball on it because inflation always goes faster usually in situations that we're in versus your revenue intake. I do understand that. But what I'm saying is, unless something dramatic happens in this next fiscal year, I mean, dramatic, I don't, thinking outside of the box, whether it's, less staff, 4-day school day, go on and on and on and on and on, third-party consulting group to take over this position. We're there. And I can't support a Band-Aid situation. And I know you've worked so hard and you're getting there, but this, I feel if anyone has not understood my communication, please let me know, but I will
I
step
think
down.
The most important
from
thing that
this.
we really have to do to stop the Band-Aid fix that you keep talking about is we need the people in Harrisburg to realize this is not just our district, it's a Commonwealth problem. They have to look at some
They
sort of
don't support
public
us.
education funding reform.
It's our problem. It's our
And
problem.
until they come up with a better funding form, I hate the property tax being used for funding public education, because it's unfair. So they need to, but we can't do anything about it. We have to deal or work with the hand that we're dealt. And this is what we have.
Yes,
Okay, well,
thank you, but I appreciate
Joni,
that. Please go ahead.
I don't mean to interrupt. Joni did a great job getting this down. Do you have the principals and staff whittling their stuff down too?
Yeah, so if we were to, and this is just yes, we are looking at that individual expenses at every building and looking to reduce those as much as possible.
Just
If
like
we
all
were,
the principals
if we were to
and
completely eliminate all of the discretionary budgets from all of the schools, if we would say they can't buy anything other than just paying for their staff,
Mhm.
that would reduce our budget by 0.5%.
Okay.
We don't spend that much on those, on what's going on in the school buildings. 0.5% at the most.
And that budget is $400,000.
It's not much, but when you keep adding it up.
Every little bit helps.
And so we're
Yeah.
getting down as tight as we can because ultimately we still have to run the schools.
Mhm.
And we have to make sure the people who are working in the schools have the materials to do their job. That's what's in that around $500,000.
Mhm.
That's true.
And so we're absolutely paying attention to that. We're cutting it down because we still have to do school.
Right.
We're gonna have to spend some money on what's happening in
I
the
just want
schools
to
every
make
day.
sure we're looking at
Absolutely,
the whole
absolutely.
What
budget.
I'm seeing here,
We're looking at outsourcing, we're looking at all sorts of things that we could possibly do to drive this down.
Because we're looking here at a tax increase every single year, right?
That's the way the system is designed, quite honestly.
Exactly.
To have a small tax increase every year. That's
Well-
that's what's expected of individual school districts from Harrisburg.
The 3.55% isn't small.
We've skipped 4 years.
Well, that's,
no, we have tax.
So we
increase
did
this
last year,
year.
we
last
skipped-
year we raised
We
it.
did last
Oh, yeah,
year
that's
also,
right.
so we skipped 4 years prior.
Prior to that, I'm sorry, yes. So we're on a little bit of a makeup routine now.
Well, I'm sure they did increase the budget and they used the ESSER funds, the federal money to balance the budget. So those were our tax increases, it's not like the budget flatlined. The budget kept going up and the ESSER funds paid the difference, so the taxpayer didn't
Right.
have to pay that difference. So technically, we're still in that same projection. It's just that the money came out of a different pot, so.
Shall we move on to the next
Looking
page?
Looking at the previous chart, it looks to me like, some of it's accounting, you're rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic, you move it from this fund to that. But it looks like you guys came up with an $885,000 actual savings, and that's good.
That's great.
And I think that the point is we need to keep doing that.
And we will.
And I don't envy you. You've got a tough job, and you're in a bad position. And, with the stuff that you showed us a meeting or two ago, there's not a lot of stuff you have control over with that. But part of it's, and this is a hard one that you're gonna have to bite, but, staffing is, or you cut down to what you absolutely need to do the job.
We will
And
continue to look
you
on
know,
that.
and I mean, voluntary resignations and retirements, that's great. But
Right
as
sizing.
much as it sucks, you may have to
Right sizing.
consider starting to have some involuntary.
So you're talking furloughs.
Yeah,
Yes, so,
Which-
and certainly
which
that
is-
may be on the table for next year, and as we look at that, there's a state mandated and district policy whole system that we have to work through for that, and it's absolutely something that we're paying attention to. It's
and-
nothing that we can do this year. is-
and
is
my
what it
own
comes down to.
opinion is, obviously the devil's in the details. If you can consolidate, you increase class sizes and you don't need as many teachers, but I'd look other places first on the staff. To staffing to get things done. So,
Here's another consideration.
because remember, the product we're selling is education, and the teachers, I can't quote it directly, but Eisenhower said something very prescient on the morning of the Normandy invasion when he was standing around doing nothing because there was nothing for him to do. And he looked at his watch, he realized it was H hour, and he says, all right, says now all the admirals, all the generals, and all the planning don't mean a thing. It's up to the men. And it's up to the teachers. So that's just my opinion on where we go with this.
I want to also remind the board that we have a comprehensive plan, a mission, vision, and a profile of the learner that you all expect me to be able to enact and reach. And that doesn't come easily, nor does it come without expense. And so if the board is continuing to hold its goals around improvement, you have to know that it doesn't come with a significant cut to staff.
Not significant, just right sizing, but of course, this is a conversation for later. I understand that, but if, I will just add one more line, please. And please don't think I believe that statewide tests show a person's complete intelligence level, okay? I will never believe it, but that's what we have to work with. We did try for a while with certain class sizes, a number of teachers, number of assistants in those rooms, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, the next curriculum meeting or next one after that, or the next one after that, when Megan shows us, you know, the results, you know, the 5-year results, 5 years ago, 4 years ago, and then the latest test scores. And, you know, technically that should always be going, can't, you know, in a certain direction. So anyways, that's another day's conversation, another committee.
Joni,
thing.
do you have can you, in your archives there, pull up one of those charts like you had up there a minute ago from 7 or 8 years ago?
I look back. I have last year's, but I don't have.
Well,
My ability to share.
I mean, the point of that is you will have seen a chart just like this, probably in 2015. And with all these terrible, horrendously looking numbers out in the future. But through all those years, some of those years we didn't have tax increases. Some of them we did. We've always been able to maintain, based on what Dr. Redmond is saying, it's the way the system is set up. And we always find a way to get that to that point. If we were, you know, if we're talking like you're talking about, you're ready to press the panic button. If we did that 10 years ago, you know, that number would have looked the same. But we're not bankrupt yet. And how is that? Why is that? Why
that's
are we
why I'm
not
saying the
bankrupt? If
projections
these
aren't-
numbers are exactly the same.
But then that means that the projections, if this keeps happening year after year after year after year after year, maybe those out year projections need to come down a little bit.
There's no way, as we've tried to explain to you 50,000 times here, that you can judge that. There's just no way. It's because there's so many unknowns. You don't know how much money you're going to get from the state. You don't know how much things are going to cost. You don't know what your insurances are going to cost. I mean, there is absolutely no way that you can make a projection on any of these numbers. These are just kind of shots in the dark, really. You guess based upon what you have right now.
so
And-
here's a way to kind of illustrate that point. We know that we have increasing costs based on the way our contracts are written, so that as time goes on, teachers have step and lane increases. We know that's a guaranteed
Sure.
increase. And that goes the same with all the other staff. We know that they're built into the pie. We know there's going to be increases.
Mhm.
At the same time, we don't know that there's going to be any increases in revenue. So first of all, we have to project the increases in expenses that we know are going to be there. Some of them
Absolutely.
are just baked in by the nature of the contracts we have.
Mhm.
Some of them are based on some projections we're doing it. As you suggested earlier, we know that insurance increases by 9% every year. So we bake that into our expense
Sure.
projections. Our revenue projections, however, we have no idea what that's going to be, and it's up and down, and there's no consistent enough trajectory for us to project what that might look like. So we have to hold revenues constant. So if we hold revenues constant and we know that costs are going to increase, it ends up looking like this.
Well, that
And
means.
as we get closer, we have a better idea of what the revenues look like, and that big difference between revenues and expenses closes in.
Okay, well, the revenues, please, I don't mean to, but the revenues over a 10-year period have a range of what they've increased, and they also have an average. So if that average is put into these budgets, you know, as revenue, okay, that's, again, we're so disassociated from the whole planning process of this. That's why I'm sorry, it might seem like a waste of conversation here, but again, if the board and the public keep seeing these out year projections year after year after year after year of these astronomical numbers, either they're really pretty close or they're overinflated. So I'm going to believe that these are, as presented, really, really close to the best of our knowledge based on the past and what we put in for inflation and salary increases. Otherwise, why would I be presented this sheet? So anyways, it's bankruptcy.
I think the most important thing we have to do is not look at that far ahead. We have to look at now. And we know now, the way we can start cutting our costs is going through line by line and start evaluating everything. That's what pretty much Joni and Dr. Redmond's done. The probably the biggest expense we have, we know, is staff. So the way we cut the largest amount of money is reducing staff. We come to the point where we have to start cutting staff. They did it this year, but through attrition, not replacing people unless it's absolutely necessary. I think that's something we made clear to Dr. Redmond. In the future, we're not going to replace someone unless it's necessary. I mean, if you have 2 special ed teachers retire and your numbers show that you need those special ed teachers, you have to replace them.
Right.
If it's elementary, you might be able to get away with them because you can add class sizes. If you have a Spanish teacher in need, you might have to hire.
Special
So
language. Sure, I
unless
understand
it's-
that.
Unless it's a need, we
Mhm.
can't hire, and that's, I
Yep.
think that's the direction we have him going in, and we told him we want to do.
Can I ask a question here? On the, I don't want to point out teachers, but on that retirement stuff we talked about. Are we at a point where we can say, okay, which is a good teacher we hire him? Does he still get hired with that 8-year commitment for retirement, or has that been stopped?
We have
For
to,
new hires?
we have to operate under the collective bargaining agreement we have.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
They still get the 8 years of health insurance. after
So
they
for
leave.
now
I think
on,
no, I think it's new hirees though, it's only single.
Right, so we have made a change, yeah.
There's been change in this contract. It was where there was a family. Yeah.
right,
Now it's reduced to
Just the employee.
individual.
okay,
But they still get 8 or 9
8
years.
years.
As in for an
8 years.
individual, 8 years for an individual.
Yeah, and that's killing us.
Hopefully sometime, the next time we have a contract negotiation, we can keep, it's been hammered down.
that's why I'm wondering, can
we'll
we keep
data.
cutting that
We need
back?
data.
As those contract negotiations open up, we will do everything we can to make sure
So there
that
was-
we're
Cause that's a big,
protecting the
that's a
public
big
dollar.
chunk.
There wasn't that many contracts ago. It was a 10-year family. And then it went to 8-year family.
15, it started 15.
you know, 15. I remember 10
Oh,
years
yeah, 15.
or till, it was 10 years or till other paid insurance was available.
No, that was
And
never.
then it
put in.
moved down to 8,
Never.
and then I was going to 8 single. So it's something you keep, that's a big expense that everyone knows,
Mhm.
but it's kind of
Well,
tough
that-
getting it through the association.
That's what I was
Cut
wondering, if that's something that we can keep whittling down.
2
I
years.
think Tracy said the other day that they said about even offering a little more money to the association if they did away with it, and they said, no, let's take it off the table.
That
This
is,
is better for them, so, but it's
that
just something,
is
we
one
know
of-
that's the biggest expense, is the staff. And we have CBAs that we have to deal with, and we gotta keep cutting down. to
Yeah, but
keep
if we
that
go
expense down.
bankrupt, the contracts are wiped. So there's a
We're
little
not
bit
going-
of,
I don't think we have to.
We're in no danger of going bankrupt.
I
Okay.
think using it, throwing that bankrupt word out to the
Yeah.
public,
Yeah.
it's kind of,
okay, well, I'm just saying,
Misleading.
well, then,
so,
the-
I have to get, I'm supposed to be out of here by 4 o'clock.
I'm
I
so
just-
sorry.
I have one thing I gotta bring up on the authorized resolution. I'm just gonna jump ahead if you don't mind, if I can interrupt you.
Mhm.
I just saw that it's on like the 3rd paragraph. That says I, comma, Dr. Tracy Long. I like Tracy and everything, but I don't think she's gonna,
I
Made it
noticed
odd.
that too.
I will change that.
yeah,
It
so.
was a template, so.
Yeah, I
think
just-
I started putting Dr. Evans' name in there, so.
I assume that's what it was.
I will
It's
change
probably,
that.
I couldn't figure out if it was gonna be it should be I, Dr. Redmond, or I,
It's
Tracy Long.
Well,
She's the
Yeah,
secretary.
Tracy's the secretary.
In another place on that form.
Yes,
So,
It's,
I will remove that.
okay, I am sorry, I have to get going.
No, you got the gist of it. And if anything major changes, I'll let you know.
So
Or Jeff. will
Yeah,
let
I
me
know you will.
so
You know
the,
my number.
just moving on this, I think this is an important slide here. As you're looking at that, if you look at our local effort, right, all of the money that we bring in for real estate, in that little box down at the bottom, you see that we bring in local property taxes, $24.5 million. And then you look at those next two columns, the yellow and the red there, those are obligations that we don't have any say over, right, for Peasers and the money that we pay out for cyber and charter. That takes 93% of our local taxes go to those two items alone.
Mhm.
Sucks. But can you, this Peasers, I know I've asked this before, sorry, in advance, but that's the mandated state retirement stuff.
Yes.
We have to
Okay,
pay per
thank you.
employee. Mhm.
I'll learn it, 4 years on the,
This is just saying, we pay this no matter what.
yeah,
We
we
are
have to do it, I
mandated
know.
to pay these expenses, so,
And those
you see that-
figures expected to increase,
Yeah,
it's just, we're getting
yeah.
screwed. but,
so after you pay those two expenses, you have $1.7 million left over.
Yeah,
And that's one of the three sources of income that we have.
right.
Both-
Those are
both
things
the
that are
local,
dictated
state,
by
and federal.
Harrisburg.
Right.
We have absolutely no say on it
Yes.
unless
So,
Take care of it.
Johnny, would you keep going, go to the next one, please?
Make it smooth. Yours is. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so this is just showing you then the fund balance, what it would look like for 23-24. If we do have the $1.5 million deficit, how that would affect the 24-25 general fund balance. It would decrease by that amount. There you can see in 24-25, there's the grant match number, the 1.4. If we would happen to use that all in 24-25, that would lower your general fund balance to 15.8, which would give you a 5.2%. I will say that the reason why we, are going through this whole exercise is 8% is a healthy general fund balance. 7% is actually still a very healthy general fund balance. We use these numbers so that we can maintain a healthy general fund balance. If the state would decide to hold, not pass a budget and we'd have 2 months without it, we would be good because of our healthy general fund balance. So we want to keep that balance, to a step between 7 and 8%. So that's why I represent these percentages from year to year. And again, this is showing numbers of, this is what we know. And this is showing the worst case if you would use all of the grant match and have your deficit of 1.16. It would affect your general fund budget in 25-26. So I'm showing you again, worst case scenario, this is what we know. And then the next slide, you have seen these slides. These are our, this is what we are working on. Again, the evaluating positions, offering the early retirement, cutting all budget spending, and we went through and done our due diligence and have cut the budget by 1.9. So then the next slide shows, this is the recommendation per the board with the last
Can I
meeting.
just ask a question, quick
Mhm.
question about how is targeting recruitment of CTE students going to reduce expenses?
It doesn't, it increases revenue.
The state reimburses.
Okay,
Or so you don't
thank you.
go-
Okay. So then here's your next slide with the recommendation and for the direction of the board to increase by 3.55%, which is, again, those numbers are included in the budget.
May I ask a quick question, Joni?
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. I'm not asking for this number right now, and I don't have a calculator with me. Well, I guess I do, but well, anyways, make a long story short. How many $450,000 properties would it take to generate $950,000 per year in tax money? I don't want to waste your time, but I'm really curious, and I have a point about that.
Yeah, I'd have to look at
Well,
that.
that's pretty complicated, because
Actual.
it's a chunk of our overall assessed value.
If the property is assessed at $450,000 at the current mill rate, how many of those houses would you need to raise $950,000?
Way more than we have.
Oh, I've seen them. They're up
I would
there.
say
400?
Just a guesstimate, if I had to guess. I would think that a
Well-
$450,000 house would bring in about $2,500 tax revenue for the school district.
Dude.
Maybe.
Okay.
Are commercial and
Maybe.
industrial properties taxed the same way?
No,
Oh, I'm so sorry.
they're
That-
taxed, but it's a different rate. And I don't know what that is off the top. of my
You
head.
mean for
Because I
commercial?
mean, that's where the money is around here, is it's
Mhm.
gonna be in you're
Manufacturing.
not gonna have a ton of $400,000 homes. I mean,
But
we
you
don't-
have
We don't
facilities
have
like,
the industry that surrounding counties do.
Yeah, but
but
commercial,
like First Quality, they're
Yeah.
tax exempt.
they're
so-
tax exempt,
Yes,
great.
yes. And
You
you know,
know.
you have other facilities and that, you know,
Yeah,
for
The
the
university's
they were
probably tax exempt.
Aren't they under the 10-year plan?
They might be, and they might be close to where they're
I think
off that.
See,
but
that's,
there-
those
and
are
there's
other
two
things. That's other
facilities.
thing we don't have, is those ones that got the tax break. When are they coming back online?
That's
We
kind of out
don't,
of our control.
we don't
but
have
yeah.
that data. Anyways, my whole point is, I'll talk about this later, but thank you so much.
And then this is
Okay.
just the millage.
Yeah.
You see we're the fourth lowest in the IU. And then the last slide was just next steps.
Do you know how many industries we have that are tax exempt?
Tax office.
And it'd be nice to know how many and when they're coming back online.
Exactly, absolutely. That data is
That-
critically important.
That would be huge numbers
Hmm I agree.
Could
if
be,
some of
yeah.
them come back on.
Well,
They stay when they come back.
but if
Well-
if the parcel's appraised at a certain amount, they still have to pay the taxes. You know what I'm saying? Unless they go bankrupt. I'm sorry, I'm not using the B word anymore. Okay, here's something I wanted to throw out there, for a further discussion. We're sitting on those 46 acres here at the property at the high school. And it's got water available, it's got sewer available, and it's got vista. If we sold that property or a portion of it, two questions. Number one, does the current, and I didn't look it up, does the current deed have any restrictions on it when it was originally purchased back in the 90s? Number two, does a public school district have any power to place any restrictions on the sale of the property? Number three, how far away is the water and sewer? Because that's what's holding up Bald Eagle Township development, is their water and sewer lines aren't very long compared to other places. So my point is, sitting on that property, either we have to because there's a deed restriction and we can never get rid of it, or two, can we sell it? And if yes, can we place a deed restriction on it so a certain style or type of house or appraised value of house can be placed, so we are gonna have some control over what would be built there? And that's just a rough concept. But that land isn't making us any money. And it would if it's back on the tax rolls.
Interesting, another consideration about that land is that at some point we will have to replace at least one of our school buildings. Because that's, at some point you just have to replace, like we found at Liberty Curtain, at some point, school buildings don't last forever. And so most of our school buildings are tight enough with land that we would have to put the building somewhere else, at least temporarily put students somewhere else. So if the school district doesn't have a place to either put a new building or temporarily put students while we're replacing a building elsewhere, that can end up being a gigantic expense for the school district, because then we have to buy land somewhere or lease land somewhere at current market rates. So I think in those two things in balance, typically the way that works out for school districts, if they divest all of their property holdings, is that over the long term, they spend more money when they have to do these big school replacement projects.
Right, well, I appreciate that because no one ever talked about it that way, but that would be 20, 40, 50 years down the road. And we have no idea. It could just be something simple. Of course, this is too much of a projection, but just like Liberty Curtain. You tear out the parking lot, you put the new building there, okay? We have so much acreage in parking lots, but I don't want to go into that because I don't have any data. So it's sort of a opinion piece at this point, but what I'm saying is sitting on that land prices are really good right now. I really think that might be an option the school board administration might want to consider just to work and see what are the potential options for that parcel. Thank you.
All right, anything else on the budget here? Because we're really running along.
Oh, you guys did a lot of hard work. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and then, you know,
What can we
Despite all-
do to make buildings last longer? Rob? Can we update them a little quicker?
Well, I think that funding the 10-year plan is a big piece of it.
Oh, microphone, please. Microphone, sorry.
The question was, what can we do to make buildings last longer? And I think that it's the maintenance of them, funding the 10-year plan as we put these high efficiency systems in, all the things that we do these buildings, we need to maintain those. Some of our buildings, you know, what you just said, roofs, keeping up with the roofs. We've done a huge amount of roofing work here, but we still have 3 roofs that are in that 10-year plan that are coming up within the next few years. Rob, Mill Hall, and Renova Elementary. Those are some crucial things. You know, keeping up with, you know, the insulation, you know, keeping the air sealing, some of those things. Also, some of that comes down to, you know, the working with the administration, working with the people within the building, you know, trying to keep students from, you know, being so mischievous and busting them up. You know, and our staff does a great job. You know, I know other districts that, you know, the kids are a big problem with that. Our district doesn't seem to have that, but, you know, just continually working with, you know, the principals, so that the kids take pride in them, you know, keeping up with painting on the walls.
Right.
You know, they say, you know, you can put a car along the street of New York City and it'll sit there, but as soon as somebody smashes the first window out of it, then they strip it. But, you know, just trying to keep up with just maintaining that outward appearance, because the kids take some pride in that. Those are just some quick and simple things.
So I think in addition to that, you know, school buildings are designed to last between 30 and 50 years.
Yeah.
50 years with all of the things that Rob is talking about. In the best case scenario, we can stretch a building out to last 50 years, but we've gone even further, right? So you look at the middle school, right? That was built in 1955. So we're coming up on 70 years on that building. And so I think there's ways that you can extend that. What we have to remember though, is the size of the classrooms, right? So you have cinder block walls. The size of classrooms is less than 900 square feet. Many of them are around 750 square feet. The expectation for the size of a classroom right now is at least 900 to 1,000 square feet. So part of the problem with extending the life of these buildings is the expectations for what happens in those classes changes over the span of that amount of time. Again, one of the reasons why it didn't make sense to remodel Liberty Curtain is that you remodel for something that gives you basically the kind of education that was relevant 60 years ago. And that's not what's expected of us by parents, by PDE, by the community, right? We're expected to
Right, but if
educate kids
class
in a different
counts keep going down, you don't need such huge rooms.
Yeah, that's a big if. We don't know if they're
Yeah.
gonna so right now we're seeing a decline. Is that gonna be true in 10 years? The data looks like it's flipping the other direction. We won't know until we get there.
But I'm going to refrain from this comment, so.
All right.
Okay, well, that was really well put, Rob. Yeah, and we're lucky. We
Yeah,
don't
thank
seem to
you.
have soils that sink. At least not where these buildings are, I think, right?
Now, I think we're pretty fortunate with the amount of work that we've done in our buildings, both what Barry had done before I got here, what I've been able to get done working with the board and administration. You know, we're in a pretty good place for our buildings, but we have to keep after them. And it's like, as Dr. Redmond stated, you know, 30 to 50 years on a building. And the state has changed up some of that stuff. They had Plan Con for so many years, where every 20 years we went in and renovated a building. So all these systems were put in the last 20 years. And then the state come in and helped you renovate that
Replace.
building. So most of the state agencies ran to failure over 20 years. And then they replaced it after that 20-year mark when they got funding for it through the state, not through the local, but that some of that stuff has went away. So it changes how we have to think about it, how we have to fund that 10-year plan, how we have to do some of those pieces. And, you know, it really puts the burden back to the local taxpayer. And that's what's tough about this. You guys are always, as a board, and I did it when I was on the board, you know, it's always down to the locals. The state's not chipping in to help with that. And if we don't keep up with our buildings, you know, we'll have major problems in 10, 15 years when systems completely fail. And so.
Oh, right.
All right, let's move on here to, I guess the only other real item we have on here is the official resolution of KCSD grant. Any comments on that?
Just, this is the resolution that appoints and authorizes Frank and I to execute all the documents and agreements for the Public Facility Improvement Plan grant. So that it's just an official resolution that the board will need to approve to.
What
allow
does that
Frank
mean
and I-
exactly? I'm sorry, I misunderstood. What does that mean you two are doing?
You're allowing Frank and I to execute all the documents and agreements that is needed for the grant.
Oh,
The
you mean
public
sign
school-
paperwork?
Yes.
Okay.
And to upload- yeah.
Thank
That's
you.
why we're spending the 2 million to gain 18
8 mil,
million.
yeah, 10.
Yeah,
about
To sign the
10
paper. Thank you, Joni. Okay,
No.
thank you.
No problem. I was officially reading it off of.
I
the-
know, that's why.
Yes, and you will see this on the board agenda.
Yeah.
To
And
be
that's pretty
approved.
much a done deal, right?
No,
Oh, it's
no,
not.
we have to actually apply for the grant. This is to allow us to actually apply for the grant.
Oh,
You're
okay.
you're saying we
You have
will,
to show match.
yes, we will sign the papers.
Right.
And we won't know till, if we even got the grant till the fall.
And
So-
again, unless we have someone championing the person who's sitting on the committee in Harrisburg. Rob, would you like to share that story? The one about the fuel?
I've gotten a couple of these grants and, you know, basically, once you, I think this is, we've talked about that, you know, once you, they know a lot of these grants up front, how it's gonna get picked, who's gonna pick them, some of that thing, but you really need that leader from Harrisburg to be coming along with you and champion your project. I've had that in the past where when you can get your legislators or people from DEP, whoever's behind that grant, once you get that, you're pretty much guaranteed. A lot of times it's known, we can do all this work. And if we don't have that support of that legislator, and we know with this Renew America, or the grant we're doing now, the funding for the heat, we know that it's going to be chosen by legislators at the end. Once it gets through DCED, it goes to legislators. So working with those people is going to be huge. So anything you can do, or any of the board members can do to talk to the legislators and let them know we're applying for these grants and we need their support, because, you know, this is a big deal for the heat system in the high school.
Well, I would really appreciate if Dr. Redmond, you know, President Bush, however you decide how you want to champion it, who's going to be championing it, and let us know, you know, first, do we step back? Do we get involved? Who's the lead person? I really want you guys to get this, and I know back door is a back door.
Yeah.
So I appreciate
So-
that.
Next,
Okay,
yeah, in a week, I'll be down in Harrisburg. There's an educator day on the hill, so I'll be working on that at that time.
Beautiful. Got a plan. Thank you, Mr. Rob.
all right. That, I don't think there's anything left. We've discussed this stuff to death, unless somebody has something absolutely relevant to the discussion here. I am saying I'm making a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you, everybody.
That was-